The gunman's finger tightened on the trigger, aim straight at billionaire Victoria Sterling's heart. Airport security guard Mark Johnson had one split second to choose: protect his own life for his hungry daughter Emma, or dive into the line of fire for a complete stranger who'd never noticed him. A pregnant stranger carrying not just her own life, but another innocent one within her. Mark Johnson looked at his empty fridge with tired eyes. His 7-year-old daughter Emma was drawing at their old wooden table with broken crayons. A red paper on the counter said, "Final warning for rent," in big letters. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Emma said quietly, not looking up from her drawing. Mark felt his heart break into pieces. He had given her his last piece of bread that morning and for breakfast. He had been without a steady job for 3 long months now. His savings were completely depleted, and the bills kept piling up like leaves in autumn, unrelenting and overwhelming. His wife Sarah had left them 2 years ago because she said she couldn't handle being a mother. She had packed her bags one night and never came back, leaving Mark to raise their daughter alone. Some days the weight of single parenthood crushed him like an anvil on his chest. But one look at Emma's innocent face always gave him the strength to push forward, even when everything seemed impossible. "Let me find something for you, sweetheart," Mark said with a forced smile. He searched through all the empty cupboards again. Behind some old plates, he found one can of chicken soup that was almost expired. Emma showed him her drawing while he heated the soup on their old stove. It was 2 stick figures holding hands under a colorful rainbow, drawn with her worn-out crayons. "This is us when we are happy," she said with innocent eyes. Mark knelt down and hugged her tight, trying not to cry. "We are happy right now, Emma. We have each other, and that is everything." But deep inside, Mark was terrified and desperate. They had to pay rent in just 3 days, or they would be thrown out onto the street. He had applied to dozens of jobs, but nobody wanted to hire him. That night, after Emma fell asleep in their shared bed, Mark sat at the kitchen table looking through job listings on his old laptop. The battery was dying, and he couldn't afford to fix it. He felt like a complete failure as a father. The clock on the wall ticked mercilessly each second, bringing them closer to homelessness. Mark hadn't always struggled like this. 5 years ago, he had been a promising technician at Tech Solutions, Inc., a mid-sized technology firm in Chicago. His supervisor had praised his technical skills and problem-solving abilities. He and Sarah had been happy, then planning for a bright future with their newborn daughter. Then the company faced a hostile takeover and mass layoffs followed. Despite his excellent performance reviews, Mark was among the first to go. "Last hired, first fired," his manager had told him apologetically. He had found temporary jobs here and there, but nothing stable enough to rebuild their lives. Sarah couldn't handle the financial pressure and the crying baby. Her postpartum depression went untreated because they couldn't afford proper health care. One evening after a particularly difficult day, Mark returned home to find Sarah's closet empty and a hastily written note on the kitchen table. "I can't do this anymore. I'm not cut out to be a mother. I'm sorry." The memory of that day still burned in Mark's mind as he scrolled through job listings. Most required college degrees he didn't have, or specialized training beyond his reach. He had dropped out of college in his 2nd year to help support his ailing mother, another sacrifice that seemed to be costing him dearly now. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight streaming through their thin curtains. Mark had barely slept, his mind racing with worry. As he prepared Emma for school, giving her the last clean outfit she owned, he noticed a job advertisement in the newspaper someone had left at the bus stop. "Airport security guards needed. O'Hare International Airport. No experience necessary, training provided." The pay was not much, barely enough to survive, but it was hope. He ironed his only nice shirt and took the bus to the airport for the interview. The bus fare cost his last $2. "Mr. Johnson, you have no experience in security work," the hiring manager said, looking at Mark's thin resume with obvious skepticism. "That is true, sir, but I work very hard and I am honest. I will do anything to provide for my daughter. She is all I have in this world." Mark replied with desperation in his voice, trying to maintain his dignity despite the plea in his words. The manager, a balding man with decades of airport experience etched into his face, studied Mark for a long moment. Something about his sincerity and determination made an impression. "Okay, I'll give you a 1-week trial period. Don't mess this up because I'm taking a big risk on you. Report tomorrow at 5 a.m. for orientation. You'll need to arrange childcare." Mark swallowed hard. Childcare was another expense he couldn't afford, but he nodded confidently. Thank you, sir. You won't regret this. On his way back to their apartment building, Mark knocked on his neighbor's door. Mrs. Chin was a kind, elderly Chinese lady whose own children lived far away. She opened the door with a warm smile that deepened the wrinkles around her eyes. Mark, good to see you. How is little Emma? She's doing okay, Mrs. Chin. I actually wanted to ask you a huge favor. I just got a job at the airport, but I need someone to watch Emma after school. I know it's a lot to ask, Miss Us. Chin waved away his concerns. Bring the little one to me. No problem. She can do homework here and help me water my plants. I can't pay you right away, Mark admitted, shame coloring his face. Did I ask for money? Mrs. Chin raised an eyebrow. When my husband died, people in this building helped me. Now I help you. This is how community works. Mark started work the very next day. The job was harder than he expected. Long 12-hour shifts dealing with rude passengers standing on his feet all day until they hurt terribly. His back ached and his legs were sore. The uniforms were stiff and uncomfortable, and the constant vigilance required was mentally exhausting. But every dollar he earned meant food for Emma and hope for their future together. Emma stayed with Mrs. Chin after school every day. The sweet elderly woman never asked for money, even though Mark knew she didn't have much either. You are a very good father, Mrs. Chin told him one evening when he came to pick up Emma. That little girl loves you more than anything. Emma is very lucky to have you. Those simple words meant more to Mark than any paycheck. He worked extra shifts whenever they were available, sometimes 16 hours a day. He saved every single penny he could. Very slowly, week by week, things started getting just a little bit better. They could buy real food instead of just soup and crackers. 3 weeks into his new job, Mark was working the morning shift at Gate 15. It was a busy Tuesday, and many flights were delayed because of bad weather. Passengers were angry and complaining loudly about everything. That's when he first saw her walking through the terminal like she owned the place. Victoria Sterling stepped out of a shiny black limousine with tinted windows. She was the powerful CEO of Sterling Industries, one of the biggest and most successful technology companies in the entire country. Everyone knew her face from newspapers, television, and business magazines. She was flying to New York for a very important business meeting that could make or break a billion-dollar deal. Victoria walked quickly through the airport with her team of assistants and bodyguards, talking rapidly on her expensive phone about complicated business deals worth millions of dollars. She wore an expensive designer suit that couldn't quite conceal her pregnant belly, approximately 5 months along, Mark guessed. She carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Mark made in 6 months. Mark couldn't help overhearing parts of her conversation as she approached his security checkpoint. Tell the board I won't accept their hesitation. The merger goes through on my terms or not at all, she said firmly into her phone. Then to her assistant, make sure Dr. Reynolds can see me Thursday. The baby was kicking all night. The assistant, a nervous young man clutching an electronic tablet, nodded frantically. Yes, Miss Sterling. I've scheduled your prenatal appointment for 3 p.m. Thursday. A reporter lurking near the checkpoint shouted a question. Ms. Sterling, how does it feel to be one of the most powerful single mothers in the business world? Victoria's face hardened, and she motioned for her security team to block the reporter. Mark checked her passport and boarding documents like he did for every other passenger, being professional and polite. Have a safe trip, ma'am, he said respectfully. She barely looked at him, just nodded quickly, and hurried toward her gate where a private jet was waiting. To her, Mark was just another invisible security guard, not worth a second thought. But that's when Mark noticed something that made his blood run cold. A man in a wrinkled gray jacket had been following Victoria ever since she entered the airport terminal. He kept looking around nervously, like a scared animal, and touching something hidden inside his jacket. His hands were shaking and sweat was running down his face, even though the airport was air-conditioned. Mark's basic security training kicked into high gear. He watched the suspicious man very carefully through the crowd. Something was definitely wrong with this picture. The man's behavior was not normal at all. Victoria was now sitting in the exclusive VIP waiting area, still talking importantly on her phone about business deals and stock prices. The strange man in the gray jacket was getting closer and closer to her, pretending to read a magazine, but his eyes never left her face. Mark grabbed his security radio with trembling hands. "Control, this is Mark at gate 15. I have a very suspicious person near the VIP area. He has been following a passenger." "Copy that, Mark. Keep watching him closely and report any changes," came the crackling reply through his radio. Mark's heart started beating faster as he watched the scene unfold. Other passengers were walking around normally, completely unaware of the danger that was building right in front of them. Victoria continued her phone call, one protective hand unconsciously resting on her pregnant belly. Suddenly, without any warning, the man dropped his magazine and reached inside his jacket. Mark saw the flash of metal as the man pulled out a black handgun. People started screaming and running in all directions. Children were crying, mothers were grabbing their babies, and chaos erupted throughout the terminal. "Victoria Sterling!" the gunman shouted at the top of his lungs, pointing the weapon directly at her. "You destroyed my life. You fired me from your company and ruined everything. You took away my job, my house, my family. Now you will pay." Mark later learned the man was Robert Daniels, a former middle manager at Sterling Industries, who had been laid off when Victoria closed his entire department. The layoffs had saved the company millions, but cost hundreds of people their livelihoods. Mark didn't stop to think about his own safety. He didn't think about Emma needing her father. He didn't think about getting hurt or killed. He just saw an innocent pregnant woman in deadly danger and knew he had to act immediately. When the crazed gunman raised his weapon toward Victoria's chest, Mark ran straight at him as fast as his legs could carry him. Time seemed to slow down as he covered the distance between them. The gun went off with a loud bang, just as Mark tackled the attacker with all his strength. White-hot pain exploded through Mark's left shoulder as the bullet tore through his flesh, but he held on to the gunman with his good arm until other security officers arrived and wrestled the weapon away. Victoria was completely safe, though shaking with terror and shock. Mark collapsed on the cold airport floor, bleeding heavily from his shoulder wound. His white security shirt was turning bright red with blood. Before he passed out from pain and blood loss, he saw Emma's colorful rainbow drawing in his wallet OS that he always carried with him. He thought about how much he loved her and hoped she would be okay without him. Mark woke up in a clean hospital bed 2 full days later. His left shoulder was wrapped in thick white bandages, and his arm was held in a cloth sling. The pain was intense and throbbing, but he was alive and grateful for that. "Daddy, Daddy," Emma's sweet voice filled the quiet hospital room. She ran to his bedside very carefully, trying not to hurt him. Mrs. Chin was right behind her, with tears of joy and relief streaming down her wrinkled face. "I was so scared, Daddy," Emma cried, holding his good hand gently. "The doctor said you might not wake up. I prayed for you every night." "I'm okay now, sweetie," Mark whispered softly, using his good hand to stroke her soft hair. "Daddy is going to be just fine." The doctor came into the room wearing a white coat and carrying a clipboard. "Mr. Johnson, you are a real hero. The bullet went straight through your shoulder muscle, but it missed all the important parts like arteries and bones. You will need physical therapy for a few weeks, but you will recover completely with no permanent damage." "What about my job at the airport?" Mark asked worriedly. He knew he couldn't afford to lose his income. "Don't worry about work right now. Focus all your energy on getting better and healing," the doctor said kindly before leaving the room. That same evening, a smiling nurse brought Mark the biggest flower arrangement he had ever seen in his life. It had roses, lilies, and flowers he couldn't even name. The small card attached said in elegant handwriting, "Thank you for saving my life and my baby's life. I will never forget your courage. Victoria Sterling." Mark stared at the expensive card for a long time. He had just done what any decent person would do. He didn't expect anything in return, especially not from someone as rich and important as Victoria Sterling. 5 days later, Mark was back home in their small apartment. His arm was still in the sling and he couldn't work or even do simple things like tie his shoes. The hospital bills were already piling up on their kitchen table, and he was worried about money all over again. Emma was being extra helpful, trying to button his shirts and make him simple meals with her small hands. She was such a good, caring little girl. They were sitting together on their old couch when someone knocked loudly on their apartment door. Mark was not expecting any visitors. Mark opened the door slowly and couldn't believe what he saw with his own eyes. Victoria Sterling herself was standing right there in his narrow archway, wearing a simple but expensive dress that draped elegantly over her pregnant belly. She was holding a large manila envelope in her manicured hands. Mr. Johnson, I am Victoria Sterling. May I please come inside your home? Mark was completely shocked and could barely speak. Yes, of course. Please come in. But I have to ask, why are you here? How did you even find my address? Victoria stepped inside and looked around their tiny apartment with curious eyes. She saw Emma's colorful drawings taped to the refrigerator, their secondhand furniture that Mark had bought at thrift stores in the small but clean space they called home. I came here to thank you properly for what you did, Victoria said softly. You saved my life without even knowing me. You saved my unborn child. I can never truly repay that debt, but I want to try my best. Emma peeked out shyly from behind her father's legs. Are you the important lady that Daddy saved? Victoria's expression softened immediately when she saw the little girl. Yes, I am, and you must be Emma. Your daddy is the bravest and most selfless man I have ever met in my entire life. I know that, Emma said with pride shining in her eyes. My daddy is the very best daddy in the whole wide world. Victoria's eyes filled with tears that she tried to hide. She had never had children of her own before this pregnancy. Her whole adult life had been focused only on building her business empire and making money. But seeing this precious little girl's pure, innocent love for her father touched something very deep inside her heart that had been cold for years. Mr. Johnson, I have a business proposition for you, Victoria said, sitting down carefully at their small kitchen table, one hand resting on her swollen belly. Ma'am, you really don't need to do anything for us. I just did what was right. Any decent person would have done the same thing, Mark replied honestly. That's exactly why I'm here, Victoria said with intensity in her voice. In my business world, people usually only do things that benefit themselves somehow. You risked your own life for a complete stranger without thinking about personal gain. That kind of genuine selflessness is incredibly rare these days. She opened the manila envelope and pulled out several official-looking documents and papers. I'm offering you a position as head of security for all of Sterling Industries. The starting salary is $80,000 per year, plus full health insurance coverage, dental and educational benefits for Emma. Mark's mouth fell open in complete shock. Ma'am, I don't know what to say. That's more money than I have ever seen in my entire life. I barely finished high school. I don't have any real security experience beyond these 3 weeks at the airport. There's more, Victoria continued with a small smile. The company will pay for Emma's complete education all the way through college, including private schools if she wants them. And there is a signing bonus of $50,000 to help with your current medical bills and to get you both moved into a proper home. Emma stared with her eyes opened as wide as saucers. Daddy, does this mean we will never be hungry again? Mark's heart broke and healed at the exact same time. He knelt down to Emma's eye level, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. No, my sweet girl, we will never be hungry again. We will never have to worry about having enough food or a place to live. But as the initial shock wore off, Mark's practical nature took over. Miss Sterling, I appreciate this incredible offer. But I have to ask, why me? Why not hire a professional security expert with actual qualifications? I'm just an airport security guard with 3 weeks of experience. Victoria's expression became more businesslike. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Johnson. Sterling Industries has been facing a PR crisis. We had to make some difficult decisions last quarter, including closing an entire division. Hundreds of people lost their jobs, including Robert Daniels, the man who tried to shoot me. She absent-mindedly stroked her pregnant belly. While the board and I stand by our business decision, the public backlash has been severe. Our stock prices have dropped. But now the heroic airport security guard who took a bullet for the pregnant CEO. That's a story that changes the narrative. Mark sat back suddenly, understanding. So this job offer is just for publicity to make your company look better. Victoria's eyes flashed with something. Respect perhaps for his directness. Partially, yes. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. But that's not the only reason. She leaned forward. Mr. Johnson, when I looked into your background, I found a man who worked as a skilled technician, who has overcome tremendous hardship, who sacrificed his own education to care for his dying mother, and who has raised a wonderful daughter alone under impossible circumstances. What I see is a man with integrity, courage, and natural leadership abilities. Those qualities can't be taught in any university. Mark wasn't entirely convinced. I appreciate your honesty, but I know nothing about corporate security. Technical security knowledge can be learned, Victoria said firmly. Character and judgment cannot. And frankly, I need someone I can trust. Someone who makes decisions based on what's right, not what's politically expedient within the company. She hesitated, then added, I'm about to become a single mother myself. My partner, he died in a plane crash 4 months ago. I need people around me I can actually trust. For the first time, Mark saw past Victoria's powerful CEO facade to the vulnerable human being beneath. A pregnant woman grieving her partner while trying to run a massive company and prepare for a child. Can I think about it? Mark asked finally. Of course. Victoria handed him her business card. Take a few days, but I should mention that the PR department would like to schedule a press conference next Monday with you, preferably accepting the position by then. After Victoria left, Mark sat in stunned silence for a long time. Emma climbed onto his lap, careful of his injured shoulder. Daddy, are we going to be rich now? Mark smiled weakly. I don't know, sweetheart. It's a big decision. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. The offer seemed too good to be true. A salary that would completely change their lives, security, health insurance, education for Emma. But was he being used as a PR prop? Could he actually handle such a responsibility? And what would happen when the media attention died down? Would he be quietly let go? He called his former supervisor from Tech Solutions, Michael Rivera, the next day. Michael had been like a mentor to Mark before the company collapsed. It sounds like an amazing opportunity, Mark, Michael said after hearing the whole story. But go in with your eyes open. Corporate politics can be brutal. If you take the job, make yourself indispensable. Learn everything you can. Document your successes. Build relationships throughout the company. Mark took 3 days to consider the offer. He researched Sterling Industries, reading about their rapid growth and Victoria's reputation as a brilliant but ruthless CEO. He talked with Mrs. Chin, who advised him to grab this blessing with both hands. And he watched Emma carefully copying letters from a workbook with her broken crayons, determined despite their circumstances. On the 3rd day, Mark called the number on Victoria's card. Ms. Sterling, this is Mark Johnson. I'm calling about your offer. I'd like to accept, but with one condition. I'm listening, Victoria replied. I want a 3-month probationary period for both of us. You can evaluate if I'm actually qualified for this position, and I can see if the corporate world is somewhere I can succeed. If either of us decides it's not working out, I leave with 1 month's salary as severance, no hard feelings. There was a pause on the line. Then Victoria laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and respect. Mr. Johnson, you are full of surprises. I accept your condition. I'll have HR draw up the contract today. 1 month later, their entire world had changed completely. Mark and Emma moved out of their tiny apartment into a beautiful 2-bedroom place near Emma's new private school. The apartment had big windows, a real dining room, and Emma even had her own bedroom, decorated with her artwork and new art supplies that Victoria had insisted on providing as a welcome gift. Even though Mark had no experience in corporate security, Victoria personally spent time training him herself. She taught him about protecting buildings, managing security teams, and understanding business operations. You have something that cannot be taught in any school or training program, Victoria told him during one of their sessions. You have natural integrity, genuine courage, and strong moral character. The technical security knowledge you can learn easily. Mark worked harder than he had ever worked in his life. He studied security manuals late into the night after Emma was asleep. He learned about the latest technology, computer systems, and corporate protocols. He proved every single day that Victoria's faith in him was completely justified. However, not everyone at Sterling Industries welcomed Mark with open arms. Several executives viewed him as Victoria's charity case, or PR stunt. Bernard Winters, the chief financial officer, was particularly cold, barely acknowledging Mark in meetings and questioning his recommendations at every turn. Don't let Winters get to you, Victoria advised when she noticed Mark's frustration. He treats everyone that way. He's brilliant with numbers, but terrible with people. Emma was absolutely thriving in her new environment. She had beautiful new clothes, all the school supplies she could ever want, and for the first time in her young life, she never worried about whether there would be food for dinner. She made lots of new friends at her school and joined the art club where her creative talents really began to shine. Mark found surprising allies within the company. Janet Myers, the head of human resources, took him under her wing and explained the complex politics of corporate America. Samuel Washington, the veteran security guard who had worked at Sterling Industries for 15 years, shared his institutional knowledge and introduced Mark to the entire security team. Most of these executives don't know what real work looks like. Samuel told Mark during a security patrol, they've never had calluses on their hands or worried about paying rent. But you and me, we know what matters in the real world. But perhaps the biggest and most surprising change of all was happening inside Victoria herself. As the weeks passed by, Victoria found herself visiting Mark's security office much more often than was necessary for business reasons. She would ask about Emma's progress in school, how Mark was adjusting to his new responsibilities, and gradually their conversations became more personal and friendly rather than just professional. I have never had a real family, Victoria admitted to Mark one quiet afternoon when most of the other employees had gone home. She rested a hand on her now prominent belly. I spent my entire adult life building this company and making money, but I never took time to build meaningful relationships with people. Watching you with Emma every day makes me realize what I have been missing all these years. Mark was surprised by her honest confession. It's never too late in life to start building those relationships. Family is not always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who choose to love and care for each other. As Mark approached his 2-month mark at Sterling Industries, disaster struck. The company experienced a massive data breach with sensitive information about upcoming products leaked to competitors. The board was furious, and Bernard Winters led the charge in blaming Mark and his security team. This is exactly what happens when we hire unqualified people for publicity stunts, Bernard said coldly during an emergency meeting. Johnson has no background in cybersecurity. He was an airport rent-a-cop who got lucky with a PR moment. Mark sat silently absorbing the criticism. There was truth to it. He was still learning the complexities of corporate security. But something about the breach didn't make sense to him. The leaked information had come from executives' emails, not from a typical external hack. While the board debated firing him, Mark quietly began investigating on his own. He reviewed login records, email timestamps, and building access logs. After 3 sleepless nights, he discovered something disturbing. The breach had come from within. Someone with executive access had deliberately leaked the information. But Mark needed proof before making accusations. He set a careful trap, creating fake confidential information about a new product and limiting access to just 5 executives. When that specific information showed up in a competitor's hands, he knew who the traitor was. Bernard Winters had been selling company secrets for months, possibly years. His expensive lifestyle, the yacht, the vacation homes, the gambling trips to Vegas, all funded by betraying Sterling Industries. When Mark presented his evidence to Victoria, she was stunned. I've worked with Bernard for 8 years. I trusted him completely. People aren't always who they pretend to be, Mark said simply. Victoria called an emergency board meeting where Mark presented his findings. Bernard attempted to flee but was stopped by Samuel and the security team. The police were called and Bernard was escorted out in handcuffs, raging that Mark would regret this and pay for interfering. That evening, Victoria found Mark in his office reviewing security protocols. She was 8 months pregnant, now her due date rapidly approaching. You saved this company today, she said quietly. Not just from Bernard, but from what could have been years of continued sabotage. Mark shook his head. I just did my job. I'm sorry it was someone you trusted. Don't apologize for excellence, Victoria said firmly. You've proven yourself beyond any doubt. The board has approved your permanent position and a substantial raise. You're no longer on probation. As she turned to leave, Victoria suddenly gasped and clutched her belly. Ms. Sterling, are you okay? Mark jumped to his feet. Just Braxton Hicks contractions, she said, though her face was pale. The doctor said they are normal this late in pregnancy. But as she took another step, Victoria's water broke, soaking the carpet beneath her. Her eyes widened in panic. It's too early. I'm only 34 weeks. Mark didn't hesitate. He called 911, then helped Victoria to the couch in his office. Breathe slowly. The ambulance is on the way. I'm scared, Mark, Victoria whispered, dropping her usually impenetrable CEO facade. I don't know how to be a mother. I don't know how to do this alone. Mark took her hand firmly in his. You're not alone. I'll be right here with you. And he was. Throughout the rushed ambulance ride, during the frantic hospital admission, and for the entire 14 hours of Victoria's labor, Mark stayed by her side. He held her hand through contractions, wiped her forehead with cool cloths, and reminded her to breathe when the pain became overwhelming. When Marcus Sterling finally entered the world, small but healthy at 5 pounds 3 ounces, Mark was the first person besides Victoria to hold him. He's perfect, Mark whispered, looking down at the tiny face. You did amazing, Victoria. Victoria, exhausted but radiant, watched Mark gently rock her newborn son. I couldn't have done this without you, Mark. Thank you for staying. As Mark gazed down at the tiny infant in his arms, he felt a profound connection forming, not just to Marcus, but to Victoria as well. Something was changing between them, evolving beyond employer and employee into something neither had anticipated. What he didn't know was that their newfound happiness was about to be threatened from an unexpected direction. Mark returned to his apartment late that night, emotionally and physically drained from the day's events. He had waited at the hospital until Victoria's parents arrived from Boston, ensuring she wasn't alone. When he opened his door, he found Mrs. Chin dozing on his couch with Emma asleep beside her, curled up like a small cat. You have been gone many hours, Mrs. Chin whispered as she woke. Everything okay with Miss Sterling? She had her baby boy, Mark replied softly. They're both doing well, just a little early. Mrs. Chin nodded wisely. Babies come when they want, not when we plan. She gathered her things to leave. That woman is lucky to have you there. Not many bosses have employees who care so much. Mark didn't know how to explain that his feelings toward Victoria had grown complicated. She wasn't just his boss anymore. After sharing such an intimate experience as childbirth boundaries had blurred, he had seen her vulnerable, afraid, and ultimately triumphant in ways most professional relationships never included. The next morning, Mark made breakfast for Emma, trying to maintain their normal routine despite his lack of sleep. As Emma ate her cereal, someone knocked loudly on their apartment door. Thinking it might be a package delivery, Mark opened it without checking the peephole, a security oversight he would later regret. The woman standing in his doorway was painfully familiar. Though 2 years had passed, he would recognize Sarah anywhere. Her blonde hair was expensively highlighted now, her clothes fashionable and clearly costly. But her eyes were the same eyes Emma had inherited. Hello, Mark, she said, her voice steady. It's been a long time. Mark felt his world tilt sideways. What are you doing here? Before he could process her presence, Emma came skipping to the door. Daddy, who's at the... She stopped abruptly, confusion crossing her face as she stared at the stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Emma, my God, you've grown so much. Emma stepped backward until she bumped into Mark's legs, looking up at him with bewildered eyes. Daddy, Mark placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. Emma, why don't you go finish your breakfast? I need to talk to Sarah for a few minutes. After Emma reluctantly returned to the kitchen, Mark stepped into the hallway, pulling the door nearly closed behind him. What do you want, Sarah? It's been 2 years without a word. Sarah had the decency to look ashamed. I saw you on the news. The heroic security guard who saved Victoria Sterling. Then they showed pictures of you with Emma. She paused, swallowing hard. I've been getting help, Mark. Therapy, medication for my depression. I'm better now. I'm ready to be a mother. Mark stared at her in disbelief. You abandoned us. You walked away when things got difficult. And now that I have a good boss and a stable situation, suddenly you're interested in being a mother again. That's not fair, Sarah protested. I was sick, Mark. I had postpartum depression that never got treated. I couldn't handle it. I made a terrible mistake leaving, but I'm here now. What exactly do you want? Mark asked, though he already feared the answer. I want to be part of Emma's life again, Sarah said. I've changed. I have a good job now as an executive assistant at Collins Financial. I have a nice apartment in Lincoln Park. I can provide for her. Mark felt ice form in his veins. Provide for her? You mean you want custody after abandoning her for 2 years? Sarah straightened her shoulders. I was hoping we could work something out amicably. Joint custody, perhaps. But if necessary, I'm prepared to go to court. I am her mother, Mark. You gave up that right when you walked out that door, Mark said, his voice dangerously quiet. Emma barely remembers you. She's happy and stable now. I won't let you disrupt her life because you suddenly decided motherhood fits your new image. Sarah's expression hardened. My lawyer will be in touch. She handed him a business card for Williams and Prescott Family Law Specialists. I truly hope we can handle this like adults, Mark. For Emma's sake. As she walked away, Mark leaned against the wall, feeling as though he'd been punched in the stomach. Just when things were finally looking up, just when Emma had stability and security, this new threat emerged. How could he possibly afford to fight a custody battle? Even with his new salary, specialized lawyers were exorbitantly expensive. When he returned to the apartment, Emma was standing in the kitchen, her cereal forgotten. Daddy, who was that lady? She looked at me funny. Mark knelt down, his heart breaking at the inevitable conversation. Emma, sweetheart, that was Sarah. She's your mother. Emma's brow furrowed. I thought my mother didn't want to be with us anymore. It's complicated, sweetie. Grown-up things sometimes are. But I want you to know that no matter what happens, I will always be here for you. Nothing will ever change how much I love you. Emma hugged him fiercely. I don't need a mother. I just need you, Daddy. Mark dropped Emma off at school, his mind reeling with anxiety. He needed legal advice immediately, but had no idea where to start. As he arrived at Sterling Industries, his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Can you stop by the hospital during lunch? Need to discuss something important. The morning passed in a blur. Mark went through the motions of his security duties, approving new protocols and reviewing weekend incidents. But his mind kept returning to Sarah's threat. By lunchtime, his stress had manifested as a pounding headache. At the hospital, he found Victoria sitting up in bed, looking remarkably composed for someone who had given birth less than 24 hours earlier. Baby Marcus was asleep in a clear bassinet beside her bed. Victoria was typing on a laptop, several folders spread across her hospital tray. The doctor says I can go home tomorrow, she said by way of greeting. Apparently, Marcus and I are both exceeding expectations. That's great news, Mark said, trying to focus on her words rather than his own problems. Victoria's sharp eyes noted his distraction immediately. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. The concern in her voice broke something in Mark. Before he could stop himself, he was telling her everything about Sarah's appearance and her threat to seek custody of Emma. She abandoned us without a backward glance, he concluded, pacing beside Victoria's bed. 2 years without a call, a letter, not even a birthday card. And now that I have this job with Sterling Industries, suddenly she wants to be Mother of the Year. Victoria listened intently, her business mind already analyzing the situation. This has nothing to do with Emma and everything to do with your improved financial situation, she said bluntly. Classic opportunism. I can't afford the kind of lawyer she has, Mark admitted. Even with my new salary, the specialized family attorneys cost thousands upon thousands. Victoria closed her laptop with a decisive click. Mark, you saved my life and my son's life. You stayed with me through 14 hours of labor when you had no obligation to do so. Let me help you with this. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering, Victoria interrupted. Sterling Industries has the best legal team in Chicago on retainer. Carolyn Maxwell specializes in family law. She'll represent you. Victoria, that's too much. It's not charity, Mark. It's fairness, Victoria said firmly. This woman abandoned her child and now wants to capitalize on your success. I won't stand by and watch Emma be used as a pawn. Mark was speechless at her intensity. Victoria continued, her voice softening slightly. Besides, Marcus seems to like you. His heart rate monitor showed improved stats when you visited yesterday. Having you forcibly separated from Emma through some legal maneuver would deprive my son of a positive male influence. Mark recognized Victoria's attempt to frame her help in business terms rather than emotional ones, and he appreciated her for it. Thank you, he said, simply. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for this. Keep doing excellent work as my head of security, Victoria replied. Speaking of which, what's the status on the Winters investigation? Mark welcomed the subject change. The FBI has been going through his financials. It appears he's been selling corporate secrets to at least 3 different competitors for nearly 18 months. The DA is considering industrial espionage charges. Good. I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. Victoria's expression was steely. No one betrays Sterling Industries without consequences. As Mark prepared to leave, Victoria called him back. One more thing, I'll be working from home for the next 2 weeks. I'd like you to coordinate security for my residence. I've received some concerning messages since Marcus's birth announcement. What kind of messages? The usual threats successful women receive: how I should be at home with my baby instead of running a company, how I'm an unfit mother for planning to continue working. Some more graphic ones suggesting various violent outcomes if I don't know my place. Mark felt a surge of protective anger. I'll handle it personally. We'll increase patrols, update your home security systems, and screen all visitors and deliveries. 2 days later, Mark found himself in the plush offices of Williams & Prescott, seated beside Carolyn Maxwell, Sterling Industries' formidable legal counsel. Across the gleaming conference table sat Sarah and her attorney Bradley Williams, a silver-haired man with an expensive suit and predatory smile. My client simply wants to reestablish her relationship with her daughter, Williams was saying smoothly. Miss Johnson has undergone extensive therapy, has stable employment, and can provide a loving home for Emma. Carolyn Maxwell remained unimpressed. Your client abandoned her child for 2 years without a single attempt at contact. Now that Mr. Johnson has secured better employment, she suddenly reappears. The timing is suspicious at best, predatory at worst. Williams smiled thinly. My client suffered from severe postpartum depression, a recognized medical condition. She left because she feared she might harm herself or her child. Now that she's received proper treatment, she wants to make amends. By traumatizing Emma further with a custody battle, Mark interjected, unable to contain himself. Mark, Carolyn warned quietly, then turned back to Williams. If your client is genuinely interested in Emma's welfare, she would approach this gradually. Perhaps supervised visitation to start allowing Emma time to adjust to her presence. Sarah spoke up for the first time. I'm her mother. I have rights. Rights you forfeited when you walked away, Mark replied tersely. The meeting deteriorated from there, ending with Williams threatening to file for emergency custody on grounds that Emma's living situation was unstable due to Mark's irregular work hours and recent injury from the shooting. In the elevator afterward, Mark slumped against the wall. They're really going to do this, aren't they? Try to take Emma from me. Carolyn nodded grimly. Unfortunately, yes, but we have strong arguments on our side. Your consistency as a parent, Emma's clear preference, Sarah's abandonment. Judges don't look kindly on parents who disappear and reappear based on convenience. Over the next several weeks, Mark divided his time between his security duties, meeting with lawyers, and trying to maintain normalcy for Emma. He coordinated security upgrades at Victoria's lakefront penthouse, installing state-of-the-art systems and establishing protocols for her household staff. Victoria had hired a night nurse for Marcus, but handled most of his care herself, something that surprised many who knew her only as a ruthless CEO. Mark often found himself at Victoria's home late into the evening discussing security matters while she cradled Marcus. How did the court filing go today? Victoria asked one such evening, gently rocking Marcus as he fussed. Not great, Mark admitted. Sarah's lawyers are painting me as an unfit parent because of my irregular hours and the dangerous nature of my work. They even brought up the shooting incident as evidence that I put myself in harm's way without considering Emma. Victoria's expression darkened. That's outrageous. You saved lives that day. They're also emphasizing Sarah's higher education and her more suitable living environment in Lincoln Park. Apparently, my apartment isn't good enough despite being in a safe neighborhood with good schools. This isn't about apartments or degrees, Victoria said firmly. It's about who has been there consistently for Emma. Any judge with sense will see that. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Emma appeared in the doorway of Victoria's living room. Mark had brought her along this evening as Mrs. Chin had a doctor's appointment. Is the baby sleeping? Emma whispered, approaching cautiously. Victoria smiled. He's just about to. Would you like to hold him? Emma's eyes widened. I've never held a baby before. Sit here beside me. Victoria patted the couch. When Emma was settled, Victoria carefully transferred Marcus into her arms, showing her how to support his head. He's so tiny, Emma marveled, looking down at Marcus with wonder. and his hands are like little starfish. Mark watched this unexpected moment unfold, his daughter cradling Victoria's son, Victoria, gently guiding Emma's arms into the proper position. Something squeezed in his chest, an emotion he couldn't quite name. "You're a natural," Victoria told Emma. "Marcus usually fusses with new people, but he seems very comfortable with you." Emma beamed with pride. "Maybe because I drew him lots of pictures for his nursery. He knows my drawings." "That must be it," Victoria agreed seriously. Later that night, as Mark tucked Emma into bed in their apartment, she asked the question he'd been dreading. "Daddy, do I have to go live with that lady, the one who says she's my mother?" Mark sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "Emma, some grown-up things are happening right now that might be confusing. Sarah, your mother, wants to spend time with you after being away for a long time. But I don't want to go with her. I don't even know her." Emma's voice trembled. "Why did she leave us before if she wants me now?" Mark struggled to explain depression to a 7-year-old. "Sometimes grown-ups get very sick in their minds, and it makes them do things they wouldn't normally do. Your mother was sick like that when she left." "Is she still sick?" "No, she says she's better now." Emma considered this. "But if she got sick before, couldn't she get sick again and leave me somewhere?" The question struck Mark like a physical blow. It was the same fear that kept him awake at night. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise you this, I will always be here for you no matter what happens. Always." Emma hugged him tightly. "I want to stay with you. And I like Miss Victoria and baby Marcus. They feel like family too." 2 days later, Mark was reviewing security footage in his office when Janet from HR appeared at his door, her expression grave. "Mark, Victoria needs you in the conference room immediately. Sarah Johnson's attorneys are here with a court order." Mark's blood ran cold as he rushed to the conference room. Inside, he found Victoria standing like a sentinel beside Carolyn Maxwell. Across the table, Bradley Williams and Sarah sat with a third person, a woman in a tailored suit who introduced herself as a court-appointed guardian ad litem. "What's going on?" Mark demanded. Williams smiled that predatory smile again. "We've obtained an emergency custody order pending evaluation. The court has concerns about Emma's living situation and has appointed Ms. Reynolds here to conduct an assessment." Mark looked to Carolyn in alarm. She nodded grimly, confirming this was legitimate. "On what grounds?" Mark asked, struggling to keep his voice level. "The court is concerned about your work schedule, the recent violence you were involved in, and the instability of your housing situation," Williams explained smoothly. "My housing situation is perfectly stable." "Our investigation shows you've moved 3 times in 2 years, Williams countered. "And your current residence was only secured after your employment at Sterling Industries employment that came about through unusual circumstances and may not represent stable long-term prospects." Victoria spoke for the first time, her voice ice cold. "Mr. Johnson's position at Sterling Industries is permanent and secure. Any suggestion otherwise is both false and potentially slanderous." Williams turned his predatory smile on Victoria. "With all due respect, Ms. Sterling, your company has a documented history of rapid personnel changes, and your own personal stake in this matter raises questions about objectivity." "My personal stake?" Victoria's voice could have frozen hellfire. "Your unusual interest in Mr. Johnson's domestic arrangements hasn't gone unnoticed. The press has speculated quite extensively." Mark felt sick. The tabloids had indeed run several stories about Victoria's airport hero and his special place in her company. Most were harmless, but a few had insinuated an inappropriate relationship. "Enough," Carolyn intervened. "The court order allows for an evaluation, not immediate custody transfer. Ms. Reynolds will conduct her assessment, and we will cooperate, fully confident that she will find Mr. Johnson to be an exemplary parent." The guardian ad litem, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "I'll need to interview Emma, visit both potential residences, speak with teachers and neighbors, and observe Emma with both parents." "When do you want to start?" Mark asked, trying to hide his fear. "Today, if possible. I'd like to see Emma in her current home environment this evening." The next few weeks were the most stressful of Mark's life. Ms. Reynolds shadowed his life, with Emma observing their dinner routines, homework time, and weekend activities. She interviewed Mrs. Chin, Emma's teachers, and even several Sterling Industries employees about Mark's work habits. Sarah, meanwhile, prepared a picture-perfect home for the evaluation, a spacious two-bedroom apartment in an upscale neighborhood with a bedroom decorated specifically for Emma, complete with new toys and books. The stress began affecting Mark's work. He found himself distracted during security briefings, forgetting important details and snapping at his team. Victoria noticed but said nothing, simply redistributing some of his workload to give him breathing room. One evening, after a particularly difficult meeting where Ms. Reynolds questioned him about his lack of a college degree, Mark sat alone in his office, head in his hands. A soft knock at the door revealed Victoria holding Marcus in a baby carrier. "You missed our security review," she said, her tone neutral. "I thought I'd come to you instead." "I'm sorry," Mark rubbed his face. "The guardian ad litem was here longer than expected." Victoria settled into a chair, adjusting Marcus in his carrier. "How is the evaluation going?" "Terribly, Oshkadip," Mark admitted. "Sarah has everything perfectly arranged, the right neighborhood, the right schools, the right extracurricular activities. I'm just a high school graduate with a formerly unstable work history who got lucky." "That's not true," Victoria said sharply. "You earned your position through courage and intelligence. Your lack of formal education doesn't diminish your capabilities or your worth as a parent." "Try telling that to the court system," Mark said bitterly. "They see degrees and bank accounts, not character." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "What if you had both?" "Both what?" "Character and material advantages." Mark One owned a three-bedroom condo in the Gold Coast area that I use for business guests. It's sitting empty most of the time. You and Emma could move there temporarily, at least until the custody matter is resolved. Mark stared at her. "I can't accept that. It's too much." "It's a business decision," Victoria insisted. "I need my head of security functioning at optimal capacity. Your current stress levels are affecting your performance." "Victoria, consider it part of your compensation package," she continued relentlessly. "Housing allowance is standard for executives at your level." Before Mark could argue further, his phone rang. It was Emma's school. With a sense of dread, he answered. "Mr. Johnson, this is Principal Dawson. There's been an incident. Emma is okay, but we need you to come to the school immediately." Mark arrived at the elementary school to find Emma sitting outside the principal's office, her face tear-streaked but defiant. Principal Dawson explained that Emma had gotten into a physical altercation with another student who had made comments about her abandoning her real mother. "How did the other kids even know about the custody situation?" Mark asked, bewildered. "Apparently Sarah has been coming to school events and introducing herself to parents and children as Emma's mom who's fighting to get her back," the principal explained uncomfortably. "It's created quite a stir." Mark felt a surge of anger. Sarah was weaponizing the school community against them. "Emma, did you hit the other child?" Emma nodded miserably. "He said I was a bad daughter because I do not want to live with my real mom. He said you were keeping me away from her because you're selfish." Mark signed the discipline form, accepting Emma's one-day suspension, then took her for ice cream. As they sat in the small shop, Emma stirred her melting sundae listlessly. "Am I a bad daughter, Daddy?" "Absolutely not," Mark said firmly. "You're the best daughter anyone could ask for." "Then why does she want me now? Why didn't she want me before?" Mark had no good answer. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, big ones. But that doesn't mean you did anything wrong." That evening, the guardian ad litem called to inform Mark that Sarah had requested an emergency hearing, citing the school incident as evidence of behavioral issues resulting from an unstable home environment. The hearing was set for the following Monday. Mark immediately called Carolyn, who promised to prepare over the weekend. After hanging up, he made a difficult decision. "Victoria," he said when she answered her phone, "about that condo, is the offer still open?" The weekend was a whirlwind of activity. Mark and Emma moved their essential belongings to Victoria's luxurious Gold Coast condo, a spacious residence with views of Lake Michigan that made their apartment look like a storage closet by comparison. Emma was wide-eyed at the doorman building the gleaming kitchen with its granite countertops and her new bedroom with its own bathroom. "Are we rich now, Daddy?" she asked in wonder. "No, sweetheart. This is just temporary to help us during this difficult time. Ms. Victoria is being very kind to let us stay here." On Sunday evening, as Emma was exploring her new surroundings, the doorman called up to announce a visitor, Victoria herself with baby Marcus. She had brought dinner from an upscale Italian restaurant, and a bottle of wine. Consider it a housewarming, she said, placing Marcus's carrier on the living room floor. Though technically it's my house. Over dinner, they discussed strategy for the hearing. Victoria had compiled a list of character witnesses willing to testify on Mark's behalf, including herself, Janet from HR, and even the doctor who had treated Mark after the shooting. I've also arranged for your work schedule to be adjusted, Victoria said. You'll have regular hours 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, with Samuel covering any after-hours security needs for the next few months. You don't have to rearrange your entire company for me, Mark protested. I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for Emma, Victoria corrected him. And perhaps a little for myself. Having you on a regular schedule means I can rely on your security expertise during standard business hours, when I'm most visible publicly. After dinner, while Mark cleaned up, Victoria sat on the living room floor with Emma, who was showing her a new drawing. Marcus lay on a blanket beside them, kicking his little legs energetically. This is all of us, Emma was explaining. That's you and Marcus, and that's me and Daddy. We're at the park. It's a wonderful drawing, Victoria said sincerely. You have real talent, Emma. Ms. Victoria, Emma said suddenly, are you and my daddy going to get married? Mark, entering from the kitchen, nearly dropped the wine glasses he was carrying. Victoria looked equally startled. Emma, that's not an appropriate question, Mark scolded gently. But Katie at school said her mom told her that's why my real mom is trying to take me away, because you and Miss Victoria are in love, but don't want to admit it. Victoria recovered first. Adults having feelings for each other is much more complicated than children sometimes think, Emma. Your father and I work together and are becoming friends. That's all. Oh, Emma looked disappointed. I thought it would be nice if we were all a family, then Marcus could be my brother. An awkward silence fell. Victoria glanced at her watch and announced it was getting late. As Mark walked her to the door, baby carrier in hand, she said quietly, children have vivid imaginations. I'm so sorry about that, Mark said, mortified. I'll talk to her about appropriate questions. Don't apologize. It's a natural conclusion for her to draw given the circumstances. Victoria hesitated, then added, Mark, regardless of what happens at the hearing tomorrow, know that you have my complete support, not just professionally, but personally. Their eyes met for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Marcus fussed, breaking the moment, and Victoria was gone. The courtroom was intimidatingly formal, with its wood paneling and atmosphere of quiet authority. Mark sat beside Carolyn at one table while Sarah and Bradley Williams occupied another. The guardian ad litem sat at a third table, her expression unreadable as she reviewed her notes. Judge Eleanor Martinez, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and piercing eyes, called the emergency hearing to order. I understand we're here regarding temporary custody arrangements for Emma Johnson pending a full evaluation. Bradley Williams rose smoothly. Yes, Your Honor. We're seeking immediate temporary custody for Ms. Johnson in light of recent developments suggesting instability in the child's current environment. The judge turned to Ms. Reynolds. Guardian ad litem, your preliminary findings. Ms. Reynolds stood. Your Honor, I've conducted initial evaluations of both households and interviewed the child, her teachers, and various other parties. While both parents offer advantages, I have concerns about recent behavioral issues manifesting at school, which may indicate Emma is struggling with the current arrangement. Mark's heart sank. The school incident was being used against him exactly as he feared. I also note that Mr. Johnson's housing situation has changed dramatically just this weekend, raising questions about stability. He and Emma moved from a modest apartment to a luxury condominium in the Gold Coast area that belongs to his employer, Victoria Sterling. The judge raised an eyebrow. Ms. Maxwell, would you care to address these points? Carolyn stood. Your Honor, the recent school incident was a direct result of Mrs. UMC Johnson inappropriately discussing the custody dispute with other parents and children, creating a hostile environment for Emma. As for the housing change, it represents Mr. Johnson's employer recognizing the stressful situation and providing additional support, not instability. And this employer, Ms. Sterling, is she present today? I am, Your Honor. All heads turned as Victoria entered from the back of the courtroom. She wore a conservative navy suit, her posture straight and confident, despite having given birth only weeks earlier. A murmur rippled through the courtroom as she walked forward. Ms. Sterling, this is unexpected, Judge Martinez said. May I ask why you're involving yourself in this proceeding? I'm here as a character witness for Mark Johnson, Your Honor. With your permission, I'd like to address the court regarding his character and the stability of his employment. The judge considered, then nodded. Very well, you may approach. Victoria was sworn in and took the witness stand. With calm precision, she described Mark's exceptional work performance, his dedication to Emma's welfare, and the circumstances of his employment. Mr. Johnson was hired based on exceptional character and aptitude, not charity or publicity, Victoria stated firmly. His position is permanent and secure with advancement opportunities. The company provided housing is a standard executive benefit, similar to what we offer other senior management. Bradley Williams rose for cross-examination. Ms. Sterling, isn't it true that you have a personal interest in the outcome of this custody dispute? Victoria's gaze was unwavering. My interest is in the welfare of a child I've come to care about and the stability of a key employee. Some might suggest your interest is more intimate in nature, Williams insinuated. Objection, Carolyn stood. Counsel is attempting to introduce tabloid speculation as fact. Sustain, Judge Martinez said firmly. Mr. Williams, confine your questions to relevant matters. Williams changed tactics. Ms. Sterling, as a new mother yourself, don't you believe children benefit from relationships with both parents when possible? When possible and beneficial. Yes, Victoria agreed. When one parent has demonstrated consistent abandonment, followed by opportunistic reappearance, I have doubts. Williams bristled. My client had documented medical issues that prevented her from making a single phone call in 2 years, Victoria interrupted coolly. From sending a birthday card, from paying any child support whatsoever. Ms. Sterling, the judge warned, please respond only to questions asked. My apologies, Your Honor. After Victoria stepped down, the guardian ad litem presented her official recommendations. While both parents have positive attributes to offer, the sudden interest of Mrs. Johnson after 2 years of absence is concerning. However, Emma has shown signs of emotional distress in her current situation. I recommend a gradual reintroduction, supervised visitation with Ms. Johnson twice weekly, increasing slowly if successful, while Emma remains in Mr. Johnson's primary custody. Judge Martinez nodded thoughtfully. I'm inclined to agree. Ms. Johnson, your lengthy absence cannot simply be erased by your current desire for custody. Mr. Johnson has been a consistent, loving presence in Emma's life. However, she turned to Mark, stability is essential. This recent move, while perhaps well-intentioned, demonstrates a fluidity in your living situation that isn't ideal. The judge announced her ruling. Emma would remain in Mark's primary custody with Sarah, granted supervised visitation twice weekly. Both parties would return in 90 days for reevaluation. As they left the courtroom, Mark felt relief mingled with anxiety. They had won this round, but the judge's comments about stability worried him. The temporary housing solution had backfired somewhat. Victoria was waiting in the hallway. How did it go? We maintained primary custody, but Sarah gets supervised visitation, Mark explained. And the judge wasn't thrilled about our sudden move to your condo. Victoria frowned. That's unfortunate. I thought it would help. It might have done more harm than good, making us look unstable. Before Victoria could respond, Sarah approached, her expression cold. This isn't over, Mark. Not by a long shot. Sarah, please, Mark said tiredly. Let's focus on what's best for Emma. Is that what you tell yourself? Sarah's gaze shifted to Victoria. That cozying up to your billionaire boss is what's best for Emma. The judge may have bought your professional relationship story, but I know better. Victoria stepped forward, her voice dangerously soft. Ms. Johnson, I understand you're disappointed with today's outcome, but I suggest you consider your next words very carefully. False allegations can be actionable, and Sterling Industries has a very thorough legal department. Sarah paled slightly but held her ground. Just remember, Mark, the court will be watching your every move for the next 90 days. Every single move. She glanced meaningfully between him and Victoria before walking away. She's right about one thing, Mark said quietly once Sarah had left. Everything we do in the next 90 days will be scrutinized, including our relationship, professional or otherwise. Victoria's expression was unreadable. Then we'll need to be very careful, won't we, for Emma's sake? The next several weeks established a new and complex routine. Twice weekly, Mark took Emma to a family center where Sarah had supervised visitation. Emma was initially reluctant, clinging to Mark and regarding her mother with suspicion. Sarah tried too hard, bringing expensive gifts, planning elaborate activities, speaking in an unnaturally bright voice. "She doesn't know me at all," Emma confided to Mark after the third visit. "She bought me a princess dress. I hate princess dresses. I like drawing and science." Mark encouraged Emma to give her mother time, though it pained him to do so. Meanwhile, they continued living in Victoria's Gold Coast condo, though Mark began searching for a permanent residence they could afford on his salary, something stable the court would approve of. At work, Mark maintained strict professional boundaries with Victoria, their interactions limited to security matters and necessary business. The tension between them was palpable, an unspoken current of awareness that both studiously ignored. Victoria threw herself into balancing motherhood and her CEO responsibilities, bringing Marcus to the office in a specially designed nursery adjacent to her suite. Employees were surprised to see the notorious Ice Queen cooing at her infant son between conference calls and board meetings. 8 weeks after the hearing disaster struck, Sterling Industries experienced another security breach, this time a physical intrusion at their research facility. Prototype technology for their next-generation product was stolen, representing millions in research and development costs. The board was furious, and several members pointed fingers directly at Mark. First the data breach under Winters, now this. "Perhaps Mr. Johnson's qualifications aren't sufficient for this position, after all," one board member commented acidly. Victoria defended Mark vigorously, but he knew his job hung in the balance. More importantly, his custody of Emma might be jeopardized if he lost his position. With just 4 weeks until the next custody hearing, Mark couldn't afford any failures. He began a methodical investigation, reviewing security footage, interviewing facility staff, and analyzing access logs. The break-in had been sophisticated, suggesting inside knowledge. Someone had disabled specific cameras and known exactly where to go. After 3 sleepless nights, Mark made a disturbing connection. The timing of the break-in coincided precisely with a shift change he had recently implemented, a schedule only shared with senior security staff and department heads. Further digging revealed an unsettling pattern. The security breaches, both digital and physical, had occurred shortly after Victoria had shown personal interest in Mark's situation. The airport shooting, the data leak after Victoria had helped with Marcus's birth, and now this break-in after she had testified in court. Someone was targeting Victoria through Mark, trying to undermine her faith in him and damage her company simultaneously. The question was, who had both motive and opportunity? Mark created a list of suspects. Bernard Winters was in custody awaiting trial, but he had connections. Robert Daniels, the airport shooter, was serving time but might have accomplices. Several board members had opposed Victoria's leadership, particularly after she announced her pregnancy. And then there was Sarah, whose bitterness seemed to grow with each supervised visit. Mark set a trap, creating a fake security protocol that included a deliberate vulnerability. He distributed it to different groups, with slight variations, a way to trace information if it was leaked. Then he waited. 3 days later, a threat arrived at Victoria's home, a photograph of her carrying Marcus into the building with a red X drawn across it. The note attached read simply, "Your poor judgment will cost you everything." Mark rushed to Victoria's penthouse, enhancing security and installing additional cameras. As he worked, Victoria paced with Marcus in her arms, uncharacteristically shaken. "This isn't random," Mark told her, showing her his findings. "The security breaches, the threats, they're coordinated, designed to undermine your faith in me and destabilize the company." "Who would go to such lengths?" Victoria asked, gently rocking Marcus, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. "I have several theories. The most concerning involves someone with intimate knowledge of both the company and our personal situations." Mark hesitated, then added, "Someone who might have multiple motivations for wanting to separate us professionally and personally." Victoria's eyes widened as she followed his logic. "Sarah, it's a possibility. She has connections at Collins Financial, which has tried to acquire Sterling Industries twice in the past 5 years. She's bitter about the custody situation and has specifically threatened to watch our every move. But how would she access our systems or know our schedules?" "That's what I need to find out," Mark said grimly. The next day, Mark implemented his trap. He accidentally left information about Victoria's schedule visible on his desk when Sarah arrived for a meeting about Emma's upcoming visitation. As expected, Sarah's eyes lingered on the papers while Mark was called away briefly. 3 days later, as Victoria prepared to attend a supposedly confidential product development meeting, a group of protesters appeared outside the venue, carrying signs condemning Sterling Industries' labor practices. The meeting had to be relocated, causing significant disruption. Mark now had his evidence. Sarah had taken the bait using information she shouldn't have had access to, but he needed to understand the full scope of her involvement and who she might be working with. He arranged for Samuel to follow Sarah after her next supervised visit with Emma. Samuel reported that Sarah met with someone at a cafe afterward, none other than Bradley Williams, her attorney, and a third person Samuel recognized as Philip Collins, CEO of Collins Financial. The pieces fell into place. Sarah was working with Collins Financial to destabilize Sterling Industries, using her custody battle as cover for corporate espionage. Her renewed interest in Emma wasn't just about money, it was about access to Mark and through him to Victoria and company information. When Mark presented his findings to Victoria, her response was swift and decisive. "We end this now," she said, her voice cold with fury. "No one uses a child as a pawn in corporate games. No one threatens my company or the people I care about." The trap they set was elegant in its simplicity. Victoria publicly announced an emergency board meeting to discuss succession planning, citing concerns about balancing motherhood with her CEO responsibilities. Information about the meeting was deliberately leaked through channels Sarah monitored. Meanwhile, Mark arranged for Emma to spend the day with Mrs. Chun, safely away from potential conflict. When Sarah arrived for her scheduled visitation and found Emma absent, she called Mark in a fury. "Where is she? You can't just cancel our court-mandated visits." "There's an emergency at work," Mark explained calmly. "I had to reschedule. Judge Martinez has already been notified." "What emergency?" Sarah demanded. "A confidential board matter. I can't discuss it." After Sarah hung up, Mark traced her movements through traffic cameras he had access to as head of security. As predicted, she went straight to Collins Financial, presumably to report the emergency board meeting. The actual trap was sprung when Collins Financial attempted to access Sterling Industries' network using the fake vulnerability Mark had created. The intrusion was logged, traced, and documented irrefutable evidence of corporate espionage. Victoria didn't hesitate. She contacted the FBI, who had already been investigating Collins Financial for other securities violations. Within hours, federal agents were raiding both Collins' financial offices and Sarah's apartment, seizing computers and documents. The evidence was damning. Sarah had been feeding information to Collins for months initially, through casual conversations with other parents at Emma's school, later through more direct corporate espionage. In exchange, Collins had been bankrolling her custody battle and promising her a position once they acquired Sterling Industries. As federal agents led Sarah away in handcuffs, she locked eyes with Mark. "This doesn't change anything about Emma," she hissed. "I'm still her mother." "No," Mark said quietly. "A mother puts her child's welfare above everything else. You used Emma as a pawn in a corporate game. That's something she'll never forgive once she's old enough to understand." The aftermath was chaotic. News of the corporate espionage scandal broke nationwide, with Sterling Industries portrayed as the victim of a sophisticated attack. Victoria's decisive response boosted the company's stock price and solidified her reputation as a formidable CEO who protected her company at all costs. For Mark, the most immediate impact was on the custody case, with Sarah facing federal charges for corporate espionage and evidence that she had used the custody battle as cover for illegal activities. Her claim was effectively destroyed. Judge Martinez dismissed her petition, entirely granting Mark permanent sole custody with no visitation rights for Sarah. The evening after the court's decision, Mark sat with Emma in Victoria's condo, trying to explain in age-appropriate terms what had happened. "Your mother did some bad things," he said gently. "She's going to be in trouble with the law for a while. That means you won't be seeing her for visitations anymore." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Is it bad that I'm not sad I didn't really like those visits? She never really listened to me." Mark hugged her close. "Your feelings are never bad, sweetheart. They're just feelings. It's okay to be relieved if that's how you feel." Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Mark stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. The past months had been a roller coaster of extremes, from near homelessness to a luxury condo from airport security guard to corporate executive, from nearly losing Emma to securing her future. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Victoria without Marcus for once. "The night nurse is with him," she explained, entering the condo. "I wanted to talk to you alone." "About what?" Victoria took a deep breath. "About us, about this situation. Mark, these past months have been extraordinary by any standard. We've faced life-threatening situations, corporate espionage, custody battles, and a newborn. Through it all, you've shown exceptional character intelligence and loyalty." "I was just doing my job," Mark said modestly. "No, what you did went far beyond any job description." Victoria stepped closer. "The truth is, I've developed feelings for you that go well beyond professional appreciation or even friendship. But I've hesitated to act on them for numerous reasons: the complications with Sarah, the court scrutiny, the potential perception of impropriety." Mark's heart raced. "I've felt the same way, but I was afraid of jeopardizing my position, afraid of losing Emma, afraid that someone like you could never truly be interested in someone like me." Victoria's laugh was soft but genuine. "Someone like me. A workaholic with trust issues who's learning to be a mother at 38. Mark, you've seen me at my most vulnerable in childbirth, afraid for my son's safety, struggling to balance my identities as CEO and mother. You've never once treated me as Victoria Sterling, billionaire CEO. You've always seen just Victoria, the person." She took another step closer. "Now that Sarah's threat is eliminated and your custody is secure, there's nothing stopping us from exploring these feelings, if that's what you want." Mark looked into her eyes, seeing not the Ice Queen CEO the world knew, but the woman he had come to admire and care for deeply. "It's what I want. But what about Marcus and Emma and the company?" "We take it one day at a time," Victoria said simply. "We build something real and lasting based on mutual respect and shared values. The rest will follow." As their lips met in a first tentative kiss, Mark felt as though his life had come full circle. From the moment he dove into the line of fire at the airport to this quiet evening overlooking the city, every challenge and triumph had led to this moment, a new beginning for them all. 3 months after the corporate espionage scandal that had ended with Sarah's arrest and the collapse of her custody claim, life had taken on a new rhythm for Mark, Emma, Victoria, and baby Marcus. With Sarah facing federal charges and no longer a threat to their family, they had begun to settle into their new life together at the Lake Forest estate. Tonight marked another milestone in their journey. Mark stood before the full-length mirror in Victoria's penthouse, adjusting his tie with nervous fingers. The charcoal suit he wore had been custom-tailored at Victoria's insistence, though he still felt somewhat uncomfortable in such expensive clothing. He was a practical man who had spent most of his life in work uniforms or casual attire, not bespoke Italian suits. "You look very handsome, Daddy," Emma said from the doorway. She wore a pretty blue dress with her hair neatly braided, looking more grown up than her 7 years. "Thank you, sweetheart. You look beautiful too." Mark smiled at his daughter, amazed at how well she had adapted to the whirlwind changes in their lives. Tonight was Victoria's first major public appearance since the scandal, and since Marcus's birth, a charity gala benefiting children's hospitals throughout Chicago. As Sterling Industries head of security, Mark would be by her side professionally. As the man who was now openly dating her, he would also be her personal escort, making their relationship public for the first time. The media speculation had been relentless since Sarah's arrest. Tabloids ran wild with stories about the security guard and the CEO, some romantic, others scandalously inaccurate. Victoria had handled it with her usual cool efficiency, releasing a simple statement acknowledging that she and Mark were exploring a personal relationship while maintaining their professional standards. "Are you nervous about tonight?" Emma asked, watching him fidget with his cufflinks, platinum with subtle Sterling Industries logos, another gift from Victoria. "A little," Mark admitted. "I'm not used to fancy parties with important people." "Ms. Victoria says you're the most important person there because you save people's lives," Emma reported seriously. "And she says you should remember that when the fancy people talk too much." Mark laughed. "That sounds like Victoria." The sound of a baby's cry came from the nursery down the hall, followed by Victoria's soothing voice. A moment later, she appeared in the doorway with Marcus in her arms. At 5 months old, he was alert, and curious, his dark eyes so like his mother's, taking in everything around him. Victoria looked stunning in a midnight blue evening gown that somehow managed to be both elegant and practical for a new mother. She had returned to her pre-pregnancy figure through disciplined exercise and healthy eating, but Mark had noticed subtle changes in her, a new softness in her curves, a gentleness in her movements when she held Marcus. "Everything okay?" Mark asked, noting the slight tension around her eyes. "Marcus is being fussy tonight. I think he senses we're leaving." Victoria bounced the baby gently. "The night nurse is here, but I hate going out when he's like this." "We could cancel," Mark suggested, though he knew she wouldn't. This appearance was too important for Sterling Industries after the recent turmoil. Victoria shook her head. "The gala raises millions for pediatric research. Besides, the board is expecting me to show a strong front after everything that's happened." She kissed Marcus's forehead. "We'll only stay 2 hours, 3 at most." The night nurse, Mrs. Patterson, an experienced maternal nurse with impeccable references, appeared to collect Marcus. "Don't you worry, Ms. Sterling. Little man and I will be just fine. We've got bottles prepared and that classical music he likes." Victoria reluctantly handed over her son, giving him one more kiss. "Call me if anything seems off." "Anything at all." "And me," Mark added. "I've programmed a direct alert to my phone that bypasses silent mode." Mrs. Patterson smiled indulgently at the anxious parents. "Go enjoy yourselves. We've got this covered." Mrs. Chin arrived next, ready to watch Emma for the evening. The elderly woman had become like family over the past months, refusing Victoria's offers of payment and instead accepting only her genuine friendship. "You two make beautiful couple," Mrs. Chin said approvingly as Mark and Victoria prepared to leave. "Like movie stars." In the elevator down to the waiting car, Victoria reached for Mark's hand, intertwining their fingers. "Ready for this? Once we step out together at this event, there's no going back. Every business publication and society page will be talking about us tomorrow." Mark squeezed her hand. "I'm ready if you are. Are you sure the board is okay with this, with us?" Victoria's expression hardened slightly. "The board works for the shareholders, and our stock price is at an all-time high after how we handled the Collins financial scandal. They'll accept whatever I decide is best for my personal life as long as the company continues to thrive." The charity gala was held at the Art Institute of Chicago, its grand staircase illuminated with thousands of tiny lights. Photographers lined the entrance, capturing images of Chicago's elite as they arrived. When Victoria's car pulled up, the flashes intensified. "Miss Sterling, over here, Victoria, who's your date tonight? Is this the security guard who saved your life?" Victoria handled the press with practiced ease, giving them just enough to satisfy their curiosity without revealing anything truly personal. She introduced Mark simply as Mark Johnson, head of security for Sterling Industries, letting the photographers draw their own conclusions from their clasped hands and matching smiles. Inside, the museum had been transformed into an elegant venue with flowers, music, and beautifully dressed guests mingling among priceless artworks. Mark felt distinctly out of place despite his expensive suit. These people were from Victoria's world, wealthy, educated, powerful. He was a high school graduate who had worked with his hands his entire life. "Stop thinking whatever you're thinking," Victoria murmured as they accepted champagne flutes from a passing server. "You belong here as much as anyone." "I've never even been to the Art Institute before," Mark admitted quietly. The admission price was always too high when Emma was little. Victoria's eyes softened. "Then we should bring her next weekend. She would love the Impressionist gallery." They were approached by an older couple, the man silver-haired and distinguished, the woman elegant in a conservative gown. "Victoria, darling," the woman greeted her with air kisses. "You look marvelous. Motherhood clearly agrees with you." "Margaret Charles," Victoria nodded. "Allow me to introduce Mark Johnson, Sterling Industries head of security." Charles extended his hand. "Ah, the famous hero from the airport incident. Excellent work, young man. Quick thinking." Mark shook his hand firmly. "Just did what anyone would do in that situation, sir." "I doubt that very much," Charles replied with a knowing look. "Most people run from danger, not toward it." Margaret studied Mark with undisguised curiosity. "Victoria tells us you were a technician before joining Sterling Industries. What field specifically?" "Industrial equipment maintenance, ma'am. Mostly automated manufacturing systems." "How fascinating." Margaret said in a tone suggesting it was anything but. And now you're in corporate security, quite a career change. Before Mark could respond, Victoria smoothly interjected, Mark's technical background has been invaluable in upgrading our security protocols. His practical experience with systems integration identified vulnerabilities our previous team missed entirely. Throughout the evening, similar interactions played out repeatedly. Chicago's elite were unfailingly polite, but clearly curious about, and sometimes dubious of, Mark's place at Victoria's side. For his part, Mark remained genuine and unpretentious, neither apologizing for his background nor attempting to appear more sophisticated than he was. Midway through the evening, Victoria was called away to speak with major donors, leaving Mark momentarily alone. He found a quiet corner near a magnificent Monet painting, taking a moment to appreciate the artwork, while observing the security setup of the venue, a professional habit he couldn't switch off. "It's water lilies," said a voice beside him. "One of Monet's most famous series." Mark turned to find Bernard Winter's wife Elaine standing beside him. She was a slender woman with carefully maintained beauty that spoke of regular cosmetic procedures. "Mrs. Winters," Mark acknowledged cautiously, "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." Elaine sipped her champagne. "The committee couldn't exactly rescind my membership just because my husband made some unfortunate choices. Old money has certain privileges in Chicago." Mark remained silent, unsure of her intentions. "You know, Mr. Johnson, many people are quite fascinated by your rapid rise," Elaine continued. "From airport security to Victoria Sterling's right-hand man in mere months. Some might call it a modern Cinderella story." "I just do my job, ma'am." "Oh, I think we both know it's more than that." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Victoria has always had a weakness for projects people she can mold and shape to her specifications. Bernard was one years ago before she decided he wasn't pliable enough." Mark stiffened. "I'm not a project, Mrs. Winters. And your husband betrayed Sterling Industries of his own volition. Did he, or was he set up when he became inconvenient?" Elaine's voice hardened. "Be careful, Mr. Johnson. When Victoria no longer finds you useful or interesting, you'll discover how quickly she can turn. Ask any of her 3 previous executive assistants or her former fiancé from business school." Before Mark could respond, Victoria appeared at his side, her smile pleasant, but her eyes cold as she regarded Elaine. "I see you've met Mark Elaine. I hope you're not boring him with ancient history." "Just offering some friendly advice, Victoria. One never knows when it might be needed." With that parting shot, Elaine glided away. "What was that about?" Mark asked quietly. Victoria's expression was unreadable. "Elaine blames me for Bernard's downfall. She can't accept that her husband's own greed and poor judgment landed him in prison." She paused, then added, "Don't let her get to you. Bitter people spread bitterness." The remainder of the evening passed without incident. Victoria made her planned speech about pediatric healthcare innovation, her poised delivery, and genuine passion for the cause, earning enthusiastic applause. Mark watched her from the side of the stage, admiring her ability to command attention and respect. As promised, they stayed only 3 hours before making their exit. In the car returning to Victoria's penthouse, she kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief and leaned against Mark's shoulder. "You were wonderful tonight," she said. "Natural and genuine." The board members were impressed. Mark frowned slightly. "The board was evaluating me." "What, your potential consort?" Victoria laughed. "Nothing so medieval. But yes, they were curious about the man I've chosen to be involved with. Personal relationships can affect company dynamics, especially at the executive level. And did I pass their inspection?" Mark tried to keep his tone light, but a hint of bitterness crept in. Victoria sat up, looking at him directly. "Mark, what's wrong? You've been tense since we left the gala." Mark hesitated, then decided honesty was essential if their relationship had any chance of succeeding. "Something Elaine Winters said bothered me. She implied I'm just another project for you, someone you're molding until you get bored." Victoria's expression darkened. "Elaine is a spiteful woman trying to hurt me through you. Nothing she said has any basis in reality. Doesn't it? You've completely transformed my life in less than a year. New job, new home, new social circle. Sometimes I wonder if you actually like who I am, or if you're just enjoying the process of reshaping me into someone who fits your world." The car pulled up to Victoria's building, but neither made a move to exit. Victoria took Mark's hand, her grip firm and insistent. Mark, look at me. I fell in love with you, guess love, because of who you already were. A man who would dive in front of a bullet for a pregnant stranger. A father who would do anything for his daughter. A person with integrity, courage, and natural intelligence that no amount of formal education could instill. Mark was stunned by her declaration the first time either had used the word love. The job, the home, the opportunities, those aren't about changing you, Victoria continued passionately. They're about removing the artificial barriers that prevented you from reaching your full potential. You were always extraordinary. The world just didn't give you the chance to show it. Mark searched her eyes and found nothing but sincerity. I love you too, he said simply, but I'm afraid of losing myself in your world, of becoming an appendage to Victoria Sterling rather than remaining Mark Johnson. Victoria cupped his face in her hands. Then we'll build our own world together, not mine, not yours, but something new that honors who we both are. Their kiss was interrupted by Mark's phone vibrating with an urgent alert. He pulled away, checking the screen with alarm. It's the direct line from your penthouse, he said, immediately answering. Mrs. Patterson, is everything okay? The night nurse's voice was tense. Mr. Johnson, there's a situation. A man attempted to enter the residence claiming to be a maintenance worker. Security stopped him, but he had floor plans of the penthouse and what appears to be a listening device. The doorman is detaining him now. Mark's security training took over instantly. Keep all doors locked. Don't open for anyone except building security personnel with proper identification. We're on our way. He turned to Victoria, whose face had gone pale. Someone tried to breach your home. Marcus and Emma are safe, but we need to go now. The scene at Victoria's building was controlled chaos. Police had arrived and were questioning a man in maintenance coveralls while building security stood guard. Mark immediately took charge, conferring with the officers while Victoria rushed upstairs to check on the children. The would-be intruder was no ordinary burglar. The listening devices he carried were sophisticated military-grade equipment. More disturbing were the detailed notes about Marcus's schedule, when he napped, when Victoria usually fed him, even which lullabies the night nurse sang. This wasn't random, Mark told the detective grimly. This was targeted surveillance of an infant. Corporate espionage, the detective suggested. Information about Miss Sterling's schedule and routines could be valuable. Mark shook his head. This goes beyond corporate interests. This was focused specifically on Marcus. A cold realization struck him. Detective, I need to see any identification you found on the suspect. The man carried no genuine ID, but they found a receipt in his pocket from a coffee shop near the courthouse. Mark's instincts flared. Check for any connection to Robert Daniels, the man who attempted to shoot Victoria Sterling at O'Hare. The detective looked surprised but agreed to run the check. Less than an hour later, they had confirmation the intruder had visited Robert Daniels 3 times in prison over the past month. Mark returned to the penthouse where Victoria sat in the nursery, watching Marcus sleep, her face a mask of controlled fury. Emma had slept through the entire incident, thankfully unaware of the danger. It's connected to Daniels, Mark told her quietly. The airport shooter. He's orchestrating something from prison. Victoria's voice was ice. I want him transferred to a maximum security facility immediately. No visitors, no phone privileges, the complete isolation. I've already spoken with the prosecutor who handled his case. They're expediting the transfer request. Mark ran a hand through his hair. Victoria, we need to seriously evaluate security for you and the children. Children, Victoria repeated softly. You said children plural. Mark hadn't even realized he'd included Emma in the assessment. Yes, Emma and Marcus are both at risk if someone is targeting you through your family. Victoria stood, resolve hardening her features. We need a comprehensive security plan, not just guards and cameras, but contingencies, safe rooms, extraction protocols. I've been working on one since the Collins financial incident, Mark admitted, but implementing it fully would require significant changes to how we all live. Whatever it takes, Victoria said without hesitation. I won't risk either child. The next morning, Mark convened an emergency meeting with Sterling Industries' security team. He laid out his concerns and the evidence connecting Daniels to the attempted break-in. We need to assume this is part of a larger plot, Mark told them. Daniels has had months to nurse his grievances and build a network. The question is, what exactly is he planning? Samuel, the veteran security guard who had become Mark's right hand, spoke up. Revenge is the obvious motive. Miss Sterling closed his department. He lost everything, tried to kill her once already. But why focus on Marcus, Janet from HR asked. If revenge is the goal, why not target Miss Sterling directly? Because he knows hurting her child would cause more pain than hurting her, Mark said grimly. And because a baby has a predictable, routine fixed location and minimal security awareness. The team worked through the day, developing enhanced security protocols for Victoria Marcus, and by extension, Mark and Emma. Additional guards were assigned, transport routes were randomized, and surveillance systems were upgraded throughout Victoria's properties and Sterling Industries facilities. When Mark returned to the penthouse that evening, he found Victoria in her home office reviewing security plans with the focused intensity she usually reserved for major business decisions. We should consider relocating, she said without preamble. This building has too many access points, too many residents and staff with potential access to our floor. I've been thinking the same thing, Mark agreed. Something more isolated with controlled approach routes and natural security advantages. Victoria pulled up a property listing on her tablet. I own a lake house in Lake Forest, 10 acres private drive waterfront access. It would need security upgrades, but the isolation provides natural protection. Mark examined the listing. The lake house was actually a sprawling estate that would require significant staff to maintain. How quickly could we make it operational? 2 weeks for basic security upgrades, another 2 for comprehensive systems. Victoria hesitated, then asked, what about Emma's school? Lake Forest is a considerable commute. There are excellent schools in Lake Forest, Mark said, slowly understanding the implication. But that would mean a complete relocation, not just a temporary security measure. Victoria met his eyes directly. Mark, I don't think this threat is temporary. Robert Daniels will be in prison for years, but his hatred will only grow. Collins Financial may be under investigation, but corporate rivals are always looking for advantages. We need to think long-term about our safety, all of us together. The word hung between them, together. Not just security arrangements, but a life together. A family. I need to talk to Emma about this, Mark said finally. It's a big change, new home, new school, new routines. Of course, Victoria agreed. This affects her as much as anyone. Her opinion matters. That night, after Emma was tucked into bed in her room at the penthouse, Mark sat on the edge of her mattress trying to find the right words. Emma, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something important. Emma looked up from her book, immediately sensing the seriousness in his tone. Is it about the bad man who tried to get in last night? Mrs. Chin told me this morning. Mark sighed, so much for keeping her insulated from the situation. Partly yes. Ms. Victoria and I are concerned about keeping everyone safe, you, me, her, and baby Marcus. Because of the bad people who don't like her company, Emma asked perceptively. That's right. We're thinking about moving to a different house somewhere with more space and better security. But it would be outside the city, which means you would need to change schools. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Would we all live together? Like a real family? That's what we're considering, yes. And would Ms. Victoria be like, my mom? Emma's voice was small but hopeful. Mark chose his words carefully. Victoria cares about you very much, Emma. And I care about her and Marcus. We're thinking about becoming a family, yes. But that would be a big step that everyone would need to be comfortable with. Emma sat up straight, suddenly animated. I would have a brother and a mom, and we'd live in a big house together. It would be a big change, Mark cautioned. New school, new friends, and Victoria and I would still be figuring out what it means to be together as a couple. But we'd be safer. The bad people couldn't find us. That's the plan. Yes. Emma considered this with the straightforward logic of a child. I think we should do it. I like Miss Victoria, and Marcus needs a big sister to look out for him. She paused, then added with complete seriousness, and you smile more when she's around Daddy. Your eyes get all crinkly at the corners. Mark hugged her tightly, marveling at her resilience and insight. When did you get so smart? Mrs. Chin says I'm an old soul. Emma replied matter-of-factly. She says some children understand more than grown-ups think. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Victoria's Lake Forest estate underwent extensive security upgrades, perimeter fencing, advanced surveillance systems, bulletproof windows, and a state-of-the-art safe room hidden behind the library. Mark oversaw every detail from guard rotations to emergency extraction routes. Emma was enrolled in Lake Forest Country Day School, an exclusive private institution that Victoria assured Mark would nurture Emma's artistic talents while providing excellent academic foundations. Mark had balked initially at the tuition costs, but Victoria was insistent. Education is an investment in her future, Victoria had said firmly. Besides, the school has outstanding security protocols already in place for their high-profile students. The most challenging aspect was maintaining their professional responsibilities during the transition. Victoria continued running Sterling Industries with her characteristic efficiency, though she now conducted more meetings virtually from her secure home office. Mark divided his time between corporate security at the downtown headquarters and establishing the new residential security systems. Finally, 6 weeks after the attempted break-in, they were ready to make the move. Mark and Emma packed their belongings from the Gold Coast condo, a bittersweet process for Mark, who reflected on how briefly they had occupied this transitional space between their old life and whatever came next. "Are you nervous about the move, Daddy?" Emma asked as she carefully wrapped her art supplies. "A little," Mark admitted. "It's a big step for all of us." "Ms. Victoria's nervous too," Emma observed. She keeps rearranging Marcus's toys in the nursery and checking the security cameras on her phone. Mark smiled at his daughter's perceptiveness. "Big changes can make even grown-ups nervous, sweetheart." The Lake Forest estate exceeded even Mark's expectations. The main house was an elegant stone structure with large windows overlooking Lake Michigan, surrounded by manicured gardens and mature trees that provided natural privacy. A separate guest house would serve as headquarters for the security team, while a renovated boathouse provided both recreational space and an emergency evacuation point if needed. Victoria had arranged for Emma to have a dedicated art studio, a sun-filled room with professional-grade supplies, and ample wall space to display her work. Marcus's nursery adjoined the master suite with a connecting door to what would become Emma's bedroom, creating a family wing within the larger house. As they pulled through the imposing gates on moving day, Emma pressed her face against the car window in wonder. "It looks like a castle from my storybooks." Victoria, who had arrived earlier with Marcus to oversee final arrangements, met them at the front entrance. She looked uncharacteristically casual in jeans and a simple sweater, Marcus balanced on her hip. "Welcome home," she said, a hint of uncharacteristic uncertainty in her voice, as she searched Mark's expression for confirmation that this massive change was still what he wanted. Mark stepped forward and kissed her gently. "Home," he repeated the word, feeling both strange and right on his tongue. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep in her new room and Marcus was settled in his nursery, Mark and Victoria stood on the terrace overlooking the moonlit lake. "This is really happening," Mark said quietly. "Us. Together. A family." Victoria leaned against him. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No, just adjusting. 6 months ago, I was counting pennies to buy soup for Emma. Now I'm living in a lakefront mansion with a billionaire CEO and helping raise her son." He laughed softly. "Life takes unexpected turns." "Do you regret it, taking that bullet?" "Never. It brought me to you." Mark turned to face her fully. "Victoria, there's something I want to ask you." Victoria tensed slightly. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just important." Mark took her hands in his. "I know we've only known each other for less than a year. I know we come from completely different worlds. I know there are still threats and challenges ahead. But I also know that I love you most, Victoria Sterling, the CEO, but Victoria, the woman who sings lullabies to Marcus and encourages Emma's art and stands firm against anything that threatens those she cares about." Victoria's eyes widened as she realized where this was heading. "I'm not asking right now," Mark clarified. "It's too soon and we have too much to figure out first. But I want you to know that I'm here fully committed, thinking about a future where we make this arrangement permanent, where Emma and Marcus grow up as siblings, where we face whatever comes next together officially." Victoria's usual composure faltered, tears welling in her eyes. "Mark Johnson, you continue to surprise me. I thought I was the one who made bold, strategic moves. You're rubbing off on me." He smiled, wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Just tell me you're open to the possibility. Someday. I'm open to it, she whispered. More than open. It's what I want too, when the time is right. They sealed this tentative promise with a kiss, unaware that their peaceful moment was being observed through a high-powered scope from a boat drifting on the dark waters of Lake Michigan, well outside the estate's security perimeter. 3 days later, Mark received a disturbing update from his FBI contact. Robert Daniels had managed to smuggle multiple messages out of prison despite his restricted status. The contents of those messages remained unknown, but the timing coincided with increased chatter among several individuals, with connections to both Daniels and Collins Financial. We need to assume active surveillance is ongoing, Mark told Victoria that evening. The lake provides a vulnerability we hadn't fully addressed yet. Victoria nodded grimly. I've canceled my appearance at the technology conference next week. No public events until we're certain the threat is contained. Despite the lingering danger, they settled into a new routine at the Lake Forest estate. Emma thrived at her new school, quickly making friends and impressing her teachers with her artistic abilities. Marcus reached new developmental milestones daily, rolling over and attempting to crawl his personality, emerging as curious and determined, much like his mother. Victoria adapted to working primarily from home, conducting board meetings via secure video conference, and delegating more day-to-day operations to her trusted executives. To Mark's surprise, she seemed to relish this more balanced approach to leadership. I never thought I could run Sterling Industries without being physically present every day, she admitted one evening as they reviewed quarterly reports together. But this arrangement actually improves my strategic thinking. Less time in pointless meetings, more time for meaningful analysis. And more time with Marcus, Mark noted. And with Emma, Victoria added softly, and you. Mark's role had evolved as well. While still officially head of security for Sterling Industries, his focus had shifted to developing comprehensive protection protocols for high-profile executives and their families, a new division that Victoria was considering spinning off as a separate business entity. Your methods are revolutionary, she told him, combining physical security with psychological profiling and preventative intelligence. There's a market for this approach beyond just Sterling Industries. In late October, as autumn painted the lakeside trees in brilliant colors, their new normal was shattered by an unexpected phone call. Mark was reviewing security logs in his home office when his cell phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Mark Johnson speaking. Mr. Johnson, this is Warden Peters from Metropolitan Correctional Center. I'm calling to inform you that Robert Daniels was found dead in his cell this morning. Apparent suicide. Mark's blood ran cold. Suicide? That doesn't make sense. He was under suicide watch precisely because we were concerned about this possibility. The circumstances are unusual, the warden admitted. We're conducting a full investigation. But I thought you and Miss Sterling should know immediately given the history. After hanging up, Mark sat motionless, a sense of foreboding washing over him. Something wasn't right. Daniels had been methodically plotting revenge for months, building a network of accomplices, smuggling messages despite high security. Suicide didn't fit the psychological profile. Mark found Victoria in Marcus's nursery reading to the baby while he played with colorful blocks on his activity mat. Victoria, we need to talk. Privately. Her expression immediately shifted to alert concern. She followed Mark to the hallway where he relayed the warden's call. Suicide. Victoria echoed his own doubt. That seems unlikely given his determination for revenge. Exactly my thought. I'm concerned this might be staged either by Daniels to throw us off guard or by someone else to eliminate him as a loose end. Victoria's analytical mind immediately grasped the implications. If it's the latter, that suggests a larger conspiracy with someone willing to reach inside a federal prison to tie up loose ends. We need to assume maximum threat level until we know more, Mark said grimly. No public appearances, restricted movement, enhanced perimeter checks. Victoria nodded, then froze as a terrible thought struck her. Emma's on a field trip today. The school took her class to the Art Institute. Mark was already pulling out his phone. I'll contact the security team assigned to the school. They have standing orders to maintain visual contact with Emma at all times. The call connected, but instead of the reassuring voice of the security agent, Mark heard only chaotic background noise, voices shouting, children crying. Agent Ramirez report status. Mark demanded, his heart racing. A breathless voice finally responded. Sir, we have a situation. Two armed individuals attempted to approach Emma's class group. We intercepted them, but in the confusion, the agent's voice broke. Sir, I can't locate Emma. She's missing from the group. The world seemed to stop. Mark gripped the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Initiate Protocol Blackbird. Now, all available agents, all access points. I'm en route. Victoria had heard enough to understand, her face drained of color. They have Emma. Not for long, Mark said, his voice deadly, calm. Get to the safe room with Marcus. Lock down the estate. I'll bring her home. The drive into Chicago was the longest 40 minutes of Mark's life. He maintained constant communication with his security team, the school representatives and the Chicago police, who had immediately initiated a child abduction response. Security camera footage from the Art Institute showed Emma being separated from her group during the commotion, then led away by a woman who had bent down as if to help her. The woman's face was never clearly visible to the cameras, but something about her movements seemed disturbingly familiar to Mark. At the museum, chaos reigned. Police had established a perimeter and worried parents were arriving to collect their children, and museum security was reviewing footage. Mark moved through the confusion with singular focus, gathering intelligence, and coordinating search efforts. His mind ran through scenarios, probabilities, and potential destinations. Who would take Emma? Where would they go? What was the ultimate objective? His phone rang, a blocked number. Johnson? Hello, Mark. The voice hit him like a physical blow. Missing something important. Sarah, he breathed. Where is she? Where's Emma? Sarah Johnson's laugh was cold and unfamiliar. Safe for now. Unlike your precious Victoria's son would have been if your security team hadn't interfered at the penthouse. Everything clicked into place. Sarah hadn't just been working with Collins Financial for corporate espionage. She had connected with Robert Daniels in prison, combining their grievances against Mark and Victoria Bape into a coordinated attack. This was never about custody for you, was it? Mark realized. It was about revenge all along. You chose Victoria Sterling and her money over your own family, Sarah hissed. You let her transform you into her puppet, forgot where you came from, who you really are. Emma is my family, Mark said firmly. The only family you abandoned years ago. What do you want, Sarah? Justice, she replied simply. Victoria Sterling took everything from Robert, his job, his home, his dignity. Then she took you and Emma from me when I wanted to reconnect. Now she'll understand what it feels like to lose someone precious. Sarah, listen to me. Emma is innocent in all this. Whatever grievance you have against me or Victoria, it has nothing to do with her. You have 1 hour, Sarah continued, as if he hadn't spoken. Come alone to Navy Pier East End. No police, no security teams. Just you. If I see anyone else, anyone at all, Emma disappears forever. The line went dead. Mark immediately contacted Victoria via their secure channel. It's Sarah. She has Emma. She was working with Daniels. Victoria's voice was steady, controlled. What does she want? Me alone at Navy Pier in 1 hour. No police, no backup. It's a trap, Mark. You know that. Of course it is, but it's Emma. His voice broke slightly. I have to go. Not alone, Victoria said firmly. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You need to stay in the safe room with Marcus. Mark, listen to me. Victoria's tone was the one she used in board meetings when presenting an irrefutable argument. Sarah wants both of us to suffer. Me by losing you. You by losing Emma. This isn't just about Emma. It's about destroying both of us. Mark knew she was right. But Marcus is safe with Mrs. Patterson and a full security team in a fortress of a safe room. You need me, Mark. Sarah won't expect me to come personally. It changes the dynamic. Reluctantly, Mark agreed. Meet me at the secondary extraction point in 15 minutes. Come armed. Navy Pier was unusually quiet for an October afternoon. The tourist season was winding down and a light rain had discouraged casual visitors. Mark approached the eastern end alone as instructed, while Victoria moved into position from another angle, coordinating with a covert team Mark had strategically placed, despite Sarah's warnings. He spotted Sarah sitting on a bench overlooking the lake, her back straight, her blonde hair whipping in the wind. Emma was nowhere in sight. Where is she? Mark demanded as he approached. Sarah turned her eyes cold and unfamiliar. This was not the woman he had once loved, nor even the opportunistic ex who had attempted to reclaim Emma for financial gain. This was someone consumed by bitterness and rage. Not here, obviously, Sarah replied. Did you really think I'd bring her to the meeting point? She's with an associate waiting for my call. If I don't check in every 30 minutes, she disappears. What happened to you, Sarah? Mark asked quietly. How did you become this person? You happened to me, she spat. You and your perfect moral compass, always doing the right thing, always the hero. Do you know what it's like living in the shadow of someone like that? Always feeling inadequate, always failing to measure up. This isn't about me. It never was. It's about your choices. My choices? Sarah laughed bitterly. What choices did I have when postpartum depression was crushing me and you were working double shifts? What choices did I have when I needed help and you just kept saying everything would be fine? What choices do any of us have when people like Victoria Sterling decide our jobs, our livelihoods are just numbers on a spreadsheet to be eliminated? So you allied with Daniels, Mark said, the pieces falling into place. You found each other through Collins Financial. Robert understood what it's like to lose everything. We helped each other. Sarah checked her watch. Enough talking. You have a choice to make, Mark. Your daughter's life for Victoria Sterling's. Mark tensed. What are you talking about? Simple. Victoria Sterling dies tonight, a tragic accident perhaps, or an apparent suicide driven by the pressures of motherhood and corporate leadership. You sign a statement that you witnessed worrying behavior in the weeks prior. Emma returns safely to you. You get your daughter back. I get justice for Robert. You're insane, Mark said flatly. I would never do that. Then you'll never see Emma again. He doesn't have to make that choice. Victoria's voice rang out as she emerged from behind a nearby pillar. I'm right here, Sarah. Let's talk directly. Sarah's face contorted with hatred. The queen herself descending from her tower. How touching. Victoria approached steadily, her expression calm despite the dangerous situation. This isn't about Mark or Emma. It's about me. About decisions I made as CEO of Sterling Industries. Decisions that destroyed lives, Sarah snarled. Robert lost everything because you closed his division. Hundreds of others, too. I made a business decision that saved thousands of other jobs, Victoria countered evenly. The alternative was the entire company failing. I don't expect you to understand corporate strategy, but I never made those choices lightly. And now you're playing mother to my daughter, Sarah's voice rose hysterically, taking everything that should have been mine. Victoria maintained her composure. Emma needs stability and love things Mark has provided consistently. You abandoned her, Sarah. Then you tried to use her for financial gain, and now as a pawn in your revenge fantasy. While they spoke, Mark was surreptitiously signaling his security team through a concealed communication device. Victoria was deliberately keeping Sarah's attention focused on her, giving them time to locate Emma. Sarah reached into her purse, extracting a pistol. Enough talk. You've taken everything from too many people, Victoria Sterling. It ends today. Sarah, don't. Mark moved protectively toward Victoria. Think about Emma. What will happen to her if you do this? She'll have you, Sarah said, her voice cracking. You'll tell her good things about me. That I was sick, that I got better, that I loved her. And will any of that be true? Mark asked quietly. Did you ever really get better? Do you actually love her, or is she just a possession you're fighting for? Doubt flickered in Sarah's eyes. The gun wavered slightly. At that moment, Mark's earpiece crackled to life. Sir, we've located Emma. She's secure. Repeat, package is secure. Relief washed over him, but he maintained his focus on Sarah, who was growing more unstable by the second. It's over, Sarah, he said gently. Emma is safe. The police have your accomplice in custody. Put the gun down. Sarah's face crumpled. You're lying. You're always lying. I've never lied to you, Sarah. Not once in all the years we were together. Emma is safe, but what happens next is, to you. You can put the gun down and face the consequences of your actions, or you can make things infinitely worse. There's another option, Sarah whispered suddenly, turning the gun toward herself. No. Mark lunged forward, but it was Victoria who reached Sarah first, knocking her arm upward. The gun discharged harmlessly into the air as both women fell to the ground. Security personnel swarmed the area, restraining Sarah and securing the weapon. As she was led away, Sarah locked eyes with Mark one last time. I did love her, she said quietly. In my way, I just didn't know how to show it. Mark nodded, feeling nothing but pity for the broken woman who had once been his wife. Victoria touched his arm gently. Emma is waiting. The reunion with Emma was tearful and joyous. She had been found in a hotel room near the pier guarded by a former Collins financial employee who had surrendered immediately when confronted by armed security. Emma herself was shaken but unharmed, having been told only that she was being taken to see her mother for a surprise. I knew you'd find me, Daddy, she said, clinging to Mark with complete faith. You always come when I need you. Later that night, back at the Lake Forest estate, with both children safely asleep and security doubled around the perimeter, Mark and Victoria sat in the library, emotionally exhausted but grateful. She could have killed you, Mark said quietly. When you knocked the gun away, that was incredibly dangerous. I couldn't let her hurt herself, Victoria replied. Not in front of you. That would have been another kind of victory for her, leaving you with that image, that guilt. Mark took her hand. You continue to surprise me, Victoria Sterling, the ruthless CEO with a heart bigger than she admits. Only for those who matter, she said simply. You, Emma, Marcus, my family. The word hung in the air between them, full of promise and commitment. Speaking of family, Mark said, reaching into his pocket, I know I said it was too soon, that we had too much to figure out first. But today made something very clear to me. He withdrew a small velvet box. Life is uncertain and sometimes terrifyingly short. I don't want to waste another day without making my intentions absolutely clear. Victoria's eyes widened as Mark opened the box to reveal a platinum ring with a single perfect diamond. Victoria Sterling, will you marry me? Will you help me raise Emma as your daughter and let me help you raise Marcus as my son? Will you build a life with me where we face whatever comes next, good or bad, together as a family? Tears filled Victoria's eyes, a rare display of emotion from a woman known for her composure. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. As they sealed their engagement with a kiss, both were aware that challenges remained. Sarah and her accomplices would face justice. Sterling Industries would continue to have corporate rivals. Their backgrounds and experiences would sometimes create friction and misunderstanding. But in that moment, none of it mattered. A security guard who had taken a bullet for a pregnant stranger had found not just a job or a relationship, but a family. A CEO who had built walls around her heart had discovered that true strength came from loving and being loved in return. We should tell the children tomorrow, Victoria said, admiring the ring on her finger. Emma will be ecstatic. Mark smiled. She's been planning our wedding for months already. I found sketches of bridesmaid dresses in her art folder. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Smart girl. She knew where this was heading before we did. Outside, the security team maintained their vigilant watch. Inside, a family that had been formed through extraordinary circumstances prepared to begin their ordinary, extraordinary life together, stronger for having faced the worst and found the best in each other.